So the last thing that I would like to do before introducing Bill Corn, the president of Clark, is to acknowledge and thank our sponsors and underwriters today. So I'm just going to read them all. PONAP, Gallaudet University, Cochlear Americas, Oticon Pediatrics, MessageNet Systems, which is a new sponsor for us this year, so special thank you to them, and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTIP. So again, thank you to all of them. So Bill Corrin is the president of Clark, and he's going to come up and give a welcome, and then we will get started with our keynote.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you here. Just want to thank you all for being here. I'm sure you're going to find today and tomorrow to be a great opportunity to learn from each other, to learn from our presenters, and just to network with folks who are doing the same kinds of work or experiencing the same kinds of things that you are. So I hope it's a great 2 days. We're really pleased with the presenters we've lined up, and hope it's going to be a productive conference for you. You met Claire. Many of you know her already. I just want to also, she thanked her staff, but I want to thank Claire too. She's been at the helm of Clark's Mainstream Services for the last 5 years and has just done a tremendous job with that and has done a wonderful job putting the conference together today. So thank you. So for most of Clark's history, our goal has been to help children. I see something flashing up here before about our mission. It's really helping kids develop listening, learning, and spoken language skills they need to succeed. And really when we think about that, it's those skills that are needed to mainstream successfully. And while that's still our primary goal, we're increasingly really focused now on the flip side of that. And that's on making sure that the mainstream has what it needs to provide the best conditions for those kids to succeed and to thrive, whether that's academically or socially. And know, probably everybody in this room knows the sea change that's taken place in deaf education in the past few decades, where we once had 80% of deaf and hard-of-hearing school-age kids in residential or kind of exclusive settings, specialized programs. We've now got over 85% in mainstream schools, and most of them are spending a large part of the day, if not all of it, in mainstream classrooms. For me, it's as both the president of Clark, but also as a parent, it's been a concern to me that in spite of this seismic shift, in spite of this new reality, the approaches to much of the professional training for people working with these kids has not really kept pace, I think, with the rate of change that this field has undergone. I think there's still a lack of training and literature on serving deaf kids, specifically in mainstream settings, and on how to do that. And that's one reason we really feel like this conference is such a valuable resource for families and professionals and kids that we serve. And this year's conference title is Building a Sound Future Together. As our elected officials in DC can tell you, without collaboration, we're not very effective. I think without collaboration, we're just not going to be able to serve these kids as well as we should. We want to help create better outcomes in whatever way we can. By we, I mean Clark. I know I speak for all of us in the room too. But our mainstream center has been doing this work for over 30 years, and we're serving hundreds of mainstream kids every year now through itinerant consulting services, audiological support, evaluation services, and really a whole range of partnerships with public school districts. We just want to make sure, though, that we're doing everything possible we can to help everybody in this room do the best job in working with these kids. And so while you are all learning from presenters and from each other over the next 2 days, I'm really hoping to learn from you what additional resources we can provide, how else we can be helpful, and partnerships that we can forge to help each deaf or hard-of-hearing student succeed. Toward that end, we recently launched a blog called Hear Me Out, written by Clark itinerant teacher Heather Stinson, who I think is in the room. Heather, are you? Stand up, there she is, okay. And it's really designed to talk about common and not so common issues, I think, for itinerant teachers and other professionals who are working with the kids out in the mainstream. You can access it. I'm going to say it. I'm not expecting you to get it right here, but it's at http://clarkmainstreamblog.org. I ran through that quickly because if you go out to there's a kind of free items table across from one of the registration tables, and there is a flyer right next to the Reese's peanut butter cups, I noticed. I know you can't really see this, but it's out on that table, and I encourage you to take it. I think it's really, you'll see that the first posting, I think, is excellent, and I think it's really going to be a great resource for people. We are also just trying to evolve our services to meet the needs of kids and the professionals that we help. And we offer mainstream support services now via Skype as well as in person. We're really trying to ramp up our social offerings for deaf and hard of hearing children in the mainstream. Trying to put together a number of opportunities to bring those kids together with others who are really navigating their way through school under similar circumstances and don't often have a chance to connect with other kids like that. We're looking at possibly live streaming this conference in the future, offering it in other locations. I like Spain, sounds like a nice place to start. But I really hope you'll share with us what else we can do to help all of us create that sound future together. Our goal is really to provide a full menu of options for districts, for professionals, for families, and for the kids, of course, to help in whatever ways we might. So, it's an extremely exciting time in this field. I think it's a time of really tremendous promise, and I know that you are all here because you want to contribute to fulfilling that promise. And frankly, these kids that we serve, they deserve nothing less. So finally, I just want to also say on a personal note, as the parent of two deaf kids, I am just deeply grateful for the commitment you all have to the futures of these kids. And thank you for being here and for the role that you play in changing their lives for the better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who is going to get us started on this workshop, Jamie Van Dyke. Jamie actually was our keynote speaker back in 2005 and received rave reviews. Not to set you up, Jamie, here, but we are really thrilled that she accepted our offer to come back and offer the keynote this year. Dr. Van Dyke is currently an assistant professor in special education and the chair of the Department of Education, Special Education at Popmont University in St. Louis, Missouri. She has over 30 years of experience as a family advocate and 20 years of experience as a professional in the special education field. Dr. Van Dyke has worked as a special education classroom teacher, a family outreach coordinator for the Oklahoma State Department of Education, Special Education Services, and as a consultant to various service agencies across the state. She has coordinated statewide research in the areas of secondary transition and self-determination, and has published widely in these areas. So please join me in welcoming Jamie.
Thank you very much. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. I want to make sure I'm not going to have too much feedback. Let me know if I need to move my position. I want to make sure that my sound is coming through clearly. I was very, very thrilled to be able to have a second opportunity to come to the Clark Mainstream Conference. And I can tell you already, just in looking through all the sessions, you've got fabulous 2 days ahead of you. And how exciting for you. Even more exciting for me to have the opportunity to be your keynote and your send-off speaker. I can't think of a more favorite topic of wanting to speak on than involving students in the IEP process. I've done a lot of work with that over the years, and I'm very proud and excited to get to share with you some of that information today. I also want to echo some of the statements that have been made already this morning, and thanking all the conference workers and coordinators. I've been working with them since the summer, and they've done a fabulous job. And really, I stated you've got a couple of really great days ahead of you. So, having said all that, welcome to the conference. I hope to motivate you and to give you a frame of reference of things to think about as you get ready to go to all of your fabulous sessions, I've already walked through all your folks that have got things to offer in terms of your various booths. And so you've got lots of great resources ahead of you. So what I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about, as we get started here, is this process of involving students in the IEP. This is actually not a new concept. We've been talking about this for 10 or 15 years, specifically in our field. Now, we've had IEPs much longer than that. All right? So I've been parading around different states talking about how to involve students in the IEP. So I'm proud to say at this point that we actually have some research to show what that looks like and how that's looking for students. And so I'm going to be showing you some of that. And I wanted to point out the little feature there, the little icon that I got on my opening slide as I rolled in the little hard hats and I got their measuring tape. Okay. I chose that specifically for my lead slide here because when we think of IEPs, we often think of the measuring piece, right? Making sure that our goals are measurable and that we've got the data that we need to make those data-driven decisions, right? I'm seeing some that not. Okay. That's very important. Okay, and we don't want to forget that. And I actually know, in looking through the booklet, that you've got some really great sessions. A couple, in fact, I think there's one session right over mine that's going to talk about writing measurable goals in the IEP. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that piece because you're going to hear more about that, right? It's a critical piece. What I get to do for the next hour with you is talk about how to use the IEP as a tool for helping students to build their legacy. Okay? The measurable piece is very important, and the data piece is very important in all the compliances that we must follow through our mandates, through legislation, through federal mandates and state mandates and local mandates. Very important. Okay? But what I get to talk to you about is the other way that you use the IEP, which is a tool for building legacy. Okay? So I'm going to get started on that. Grab my remote. The way I'd like to present this to you today is through a series of session objectives, which I've turned into questions. So I've got 5 different things that I want to share with you over the next hour. First off, when we talk about a legacy, if we're going to talk about the IEP as a tool for building legacy, I want to start off by just talking about what is this legacy process and building that. I'm going to spend a little time talking about that. I'm going to share with you what research says about involving students in the IEP. We spend a little time talking about some current trends and strategies for when we're working with students. And then the 4th piece, which is my favorite, is I actually get to show you some work from some things that I've been working with in my research. And you're going to get to see what they have to say and see some of their products. So I'm very excited to get to show you some of those. And then lastly, just summing up with how the IEP process can be a legacy building tool. Okay, and I want to really focus on that word process, because when we're involving students in the IEP meeting, we've got to do lots of work before we actually get to the meeting part. Right, so there's a process that we work with in this. So I want to share part of those things with you. So let's get busy with looking at this first thing. What does it mean to build a legacy? So really good questions. And for every person in the room here today, there's going to be a different answer. So we all have an idea of what legacy means. But being the educators that I am, okay, I always have to start at the beginning, and usually a definition is a good place to start. Okay? Now I'm going to date myself just a little bit, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands to all of you. Okay? When I think of defining the word, the first place I want to go is my Webster's dictionary, right? I even have, actually, I have to say I have 2 of these, all right? The red hardbound, red Webster's World Dictionary. Raise your hand if you share that with me. Yes. Maybe you still even have the paper sleeve that goes over it, right? Yeah? Okay, I have 2 of those. I have one at my work desk, and then I have one at my home desk. And I still go to my Webster's Dictionary from time to time, but I also find that I'm going more and more to the online dictionary. Okay? But as I was putting this presentation together, I wanted to start off with this defining legacy. And so I went to Webster's first. And I got this definition. It's something that's handed down or from, such as from an ancestor. And then I went to the online Encarta dictionary, all right, and got a similar definition. Something that's handed down from a previous generation or time, and the synonym is heritage. So I wanted to make sure that I understood clearly heritage. All right, so again, I went to my trusty red hardback Webster dictionary, and the definition for heritage is something, again, that's handed down from one's ancestors or the past as a characteristic or a culture or a tradition. And then when I looked on the online Encarta, a few more words to add to that. Something that's passed from one generation to the next, such as a social group or a way of life or tradition or culture. And again, the synonym for that is legacy. So that's the backdrop for what I want us to think about in terms of legacy and heritage. Now I'm going to date myself one more time. One of my most favorite movies of all time is Kevin Costner's Field of Dreams. Raise your hand again. We've got some Kevin Costner fans. Absolutely. I love this movie. All right? And there's a phrase from that movie that we all know very well, right? If you build it, it will come. Right? If you build it, it will come. I think one of the reasons why I love this movie so much, and probably several of you, is that he has this vision that he receives, and he doesn't quite know where it comes from. But he's got to build this baseball field and he's playing field. Right? And it seems crazy. And he doesn't have a lot of support. He feels really driven to do this. And over he keeps hearing this voice, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. And sure enough, that happens. Right? He builds it and great things happen. So I want to give that to you as a backdrop. When we think about legacy, when we think about heritage, when we think about providing this really strong force for our students, when we think about the IEP process, not just a meeting, but the IEP process and the meeting, let's make sure that we're not passing down a legacy or a heritage or something that's been handed down that is filled with just complaints. Oh, we've got to do this meeting, we've got this annual meeting that we have to do. We have to make sure we address the goals, and we have to make sure we address the amount of minutes of service the student's going to be getting. And the reason I say this is because we've come way too far as a community to just let the IEP meeting and the IEP process become a legacy of compliance. We don't want that to happen. We want instead for the IEP process to be this tool to build a legacy, right, of positive outcomes, a legacy of success. Right? So if we want to help students to begin to build a legacy of success, how do we do that? Right? It may sound really easy, but like I said at the very beginning, all of us in this room are going to have a different idea of what legacy means, right, and what a heritage means. But if we want students to start seeing the IEP process as a beginning for a legacy of success, there are some things we need to do. All right? Here's what I think we need to do at the very beginning of this process. So begin to think of the IEP as this opportunity to build a legacy. I think this is the first question you need to ask. How do you want to be remembered? Now that's a loaded question. Almost as big a question as the first one when I asked you what is a legacy meeting. How do you want to be remembered? Now, I can tell you the first time this question was asked of me was, let's say 20 plus years ago, trying not to date myself completely. Let's say in the early 80s. I was finishing my bachelor's work, and I was getting ready to do my student teaching. And we were having our student teaching seminar, and one of my professors was leading the seminar. And the very first part of that, they sat us all down, and they said, how do you want to be remembered? I want you to think about that, and I want you to write down how you think you're going to be remembered. But here's the rule. It has to be something short. It has to be a phrase. It has to be something so short and so small that you could fit it on your tombstone. I really thought about that. Okay. And I came up with, she made a difference. I was like, oh, that's how I would like to be remembered. And what I was starting to do was build that legacy for myself. That's what I put. Right? That made an impact for me, obviously, because I'm sharing it with you now. And I hope that I'm making a difference for others. I hope that most of us in here have chosen the field of education. We're working with students that are hard to figure out. Or we've chosen some type of service. We're all in some kind of service field. And we hope that we make a difference. That's one of the reasons why this is a field of calling. We go into this field because we feel called to do that. Right? So when we're thinking about this, I also love this quote, so I wanted to share this as well. This is a quote that was originated by Dr. Seuss. And it says, "Today I behave as though this is the day by which I shall be remembered." Today I behave as though this is the day I'll be remembered. And I think about that, that quote keeps me in check. And I have to say, now I can't speak for all of you in here, but I have to say that I've had some days that, oh my, if that was the day I was going to be remembered by, I would not be meeting my legacy token, right? But I made a difference, all right? We all have days, all right? But that's a good thing for us to remember. And I talk to students a lot about that. You know, the choices you make and how you behave, this might be the day that people will remember. Okay? Okay. So this is a question that has been really prominent for me throughout my professional time. And it did start because that question was asked me when I was doing my student teaching. So throughout the years, I've asked this question several times to different individuals. How is it that you want to be remembered? And so I'm going to share with you a couple of the quotes that have been game changers for me and really made me think about what this whole legacy piece is. Okay? You know, I'm taking time to share this with you before I get into sharing with you the research and the student products because I'm really wanting to set the backdrop for you this morning. Okay. So Vera had me when she was 97 years old. I tell you, Vera was my grandmother. Okay. We thought for sure she lived to be 100 years old. And she actually passed shortly after we had this conversation. But she was an educator through and through. And became a teacher in Oklahoma. Back when all you had to have was a 5th grade education to be an educator. She went all the way to 8th grade. And she taught at a one-room schoolhouse and had wonderful stories to share. She eventually went back and got her master's degree, went to Keefe College in Oklahoma, got her certificate, and she did the whole 9 yards. I loved hearing her stories. And so I had this really great conversation with her one day. And for about the last 7 years of her life, we moved her into an assisted living center. And which was really close to Norman, Oklahoma, which is where I was doing my doctorate work. So I got a chance to visit with Grandma G, that's what we call her. I'm almost every Friday. We had lots of great conversations. And I noticed that she did something very peculiar. Anytime she received any kind of a card, a Christmas card, birthday cards, Easter cards, she would save them. And they would pile up, and she'd have these stacks of cards. She'd keep them out. Well, first she'd display them, you know, for about a month. And then she'd stack them up, and she'd eventually put them in drawers, and they'd go in boxes. And I asked her, I said, "Can I ask why you're doing this?" Her response was, "Well, this is very important to me. This is how I know that people still remember me." Oh, wow. So when I asked her this question one day, I said, "You know, how's it that you remember me?" I expected an answer, something similar to what I gave when I was doing my student teaching. You know, I really hope that I made a difference for all the students that I taught, you know, all the different things that I've gone through. That's not what she said. What she said is right here. I know I remember when people send me cards. And it's really important that I get these cards because that's how I know that I'm validated. When she said that, I said, you know, I've noticed that, and that's great, but I said, how do you want to be remembered? Because I was really wanting to get to this legacy piece. And she said, it doesn't matter. All that matters to me is that they take the time to send me a card. Okay? And if they've done that, then I know that they care. And that's what counts. And in fact, I do count them. Okay? And she figured that, you know, the ceiling for her was 25. Okay? And she really did count. And even up until age 97, she received at least 25, but the number got smaller and smaller because she was outliving a lot of her friends, okay, and a lot of people that knew her. and she was from a large family. She was number 8, I think a family of 11, so she outlived a lot of her brothers and sisters too. So it's very telling. And I thought about that a lot when she said that. I want to share with you now kind of another game changer quote for me too. This came from the individual that has some disabilities, and we were working with her on the futures planning. We were doing the making action plan when we build this action planning system. We were asking lots of questions. I always ask this question: how do you want to be remembered when we talk about your future? And this was the response I got. I get mad if my Facebook friends and other people that support me don't respond to my posts or my texts. Right? And this was a female. She said, I want to respond really quickly, especially for a text. If you're not responding to me in 20 or 30 minutes, then you must be mad at me, and that's not good. And so again, I'm asking the question because it's like I have a similar response from, that I got from my grandmother. So I asked this question, and then I said, okay, but when people think about you, how do you want them to remember you? What do you want them to think about when you think about you? And the response was, I want them to realize I don't want to think more. Okay? Same kind of response. I thought, very interesting. Very interesting. So what this boils down to is relationships. It's really all about the relationships that we have, the relationships that we make. It's not about services. Okay? It's not about all of the wonderful things that we've accomplished, although those are great, right? It's the relationships. So I'm going to read this, because I think this is so powerful. We are remembered through, by, and because of the relationships we build in life, and the impact we have on the people that we have those relationships with. Okay? So 20 plus years ago when I said, I want to make a difference, I was really focusing on that second piece, having an impact. But what's really important is the relationships, the connections with that. And I can tell you that when I'm 97, and I hope I live to be 97, and I hope I'm as good a health as my grandmother was, I'm not going to be asking for my research papers and my articles and my presentations to be laid out in front of me so I can do all my work. That's not what I'm going to be asking for. Okay? It's going to be the relationships and the people that I've made those bonds with, and that hopefully I've made a difference for. But we know as educators, and I've learned this over the years, we seldom know when we make that difference. Okay? Unless a student, work parent, work family member comes back and says, remember when you did that, or remember when you said that. Okay? So again, we choose to go into this field because it's a calling. The relationship piece is huge. Right? How does this thing connect to the IEP? Right? Lay the foundation. Now we're going to actually get into the meat of this. All right? This fits in perfectly to the IEP, especially through our transition year days. How many of you here are actually working with individuals that are middle school age or high school? Okay, quite a few. How many work with students that are elementary age or younger? Okay, so we've got about half. Everything that I'm going to be sharing with you applies to all of these groups. Okay, we tend to think of transition as that thing that we do at 14 or 15 or 16. Right? But we build the process for that much sooner. And it does all come down to relationships. Okay? But when we're talking about employment, education and training, and independent living, all of those things are met through relationships and how we build those relationships. Okay? So this is the answer to the question. How do we help parents? How do we help students begin to see the IEP process as a legacy? We do it by helping to cement and build those relationships. Because that's really what counts. And that's where it all begins. Alright? So, it sounds so simple, right? When you stand up and go, oh yeah, we make sure we're building relationships. We're working with students on what do you want to do with your life? Where do you want to live? Where do you want to work? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? Sounds really easy. Okay? But it's actually quite complicated. All right? The legacy building process for your relationships is not easy at all. I'm going to be sharing with you some quotes for some students that have gone through this process, and they say it's one of the hardest things. Absolutely one of the hardest things to do, to try to cement relationships as part of the IEP. All right? Here's what it requires. It requires instruction in self-determination skills and appropriate self-advocacy skills. Okay? And I say appropriate self-advocacy skills because how many of you have been working with students and they know all about their IEP, okay? And they know about the accommodations, and I've had students come in to teachers and go, I can retake that test 10 times if I want because I have an IEP, and you can't stop me. Anybody experience something like that? I see lots of head nods, right? Yeah, that's what I call advocacy gone wrong. Okay? The appropriate way to advocate. And students need instruction in that as well. Right? So let's talk then about what we need to do as we're working with students on gaining these skills so they can start to build this relationship. We have to work on self-determination skills. And this is an umbrella set of skills. Right? Self-advocacy is actually a set of skills that fits underneath this umbrella of self-determination. And so there's an excellent quote, and I'm going to read this quote just because I want you to see all the parts of this. This is actually from Martin Huber Marshall. They've done some fabulous research on student involvement in the IEP process and what that means and the different components. And I'm going to share with you some of that research in just a little bit. And here's what self-determination is defined as. Self-determined individuals know how to choose. They know what they want and how to get it. Just that first statement right there. Know how to choose. Students know how to make choices and make appropriate choices. Okay? Knowing what they want, understanding what their desires are, and knowing how to go about getting that. From an awareness of personal needs. How many of our students here struggle with understanding what they need in terms of accommodations? I see head nods. Understand what their disability is and how it affects their success in the general ed classroom. So if we're asking students and kids, whether we're a teacher or a family member, we've got to make sure we're asking them to be self-determined. We've got to make sure that they have all these sub-skills first. So self-determined individuals choose goals and doggedly pursue them. This involves asserting an individual's presence and asserting but not being aggressive, right? Okay? Making his or her needs known, and again, doing that in a way that's acceptable publicly, right? Evaluating progress toward meeting goals. Okay? We'll go back to that measuring tape, right? First off, does the student know what the goals are, and then how is their progress in meeting them? How are they doing? Can we report on that? Are they meeting that at a 50% or 60% or 70%? Who's keeping that data? Okay. Adjusting performance. So realizing, oh, I need to make a change, and creating unique approaches to solving problems. And if I need to make a change, what can I do to change that? Okay. This is an entire school curriculum. This is a lifetime curriculum right here. Right? And we need to start working with kids on this when they're very, very young, even as parents, before our kids even start in school. Okay? So we've got our work cut out for us. But if we expect students and families to see the IEP as this legacy building process, which it can be, we've got to make sure that we've got these skills under their belt and they're continuous. All right? So there's these constructs that come out from that. I just pointed out most of them as I was reading the definition. And I love this little guide. Sometimes we feel that way when we're trying to learn self-determination skills. Students will tell you that. Sometimes we feel that way as adults as we're trying to, exercise these skills. Right? All right, self-awareness, self-efficacy, which is that belief. I believe that I can. I always think of the little engine that could. I think I can. I think I can. Self-efficacy, really important as a self-determination skill. Right? Self-advocacy fits underneath that. It's one of those sub-skills. Right? Self-management, self-evaluation, and then making those adjustments. So those are the constructs that we're working with. All right? So, now we've got to call on opportunities. All right? Because we can't build meaningful relationships if we don't have these constructs in place. All right? So these skills, these self-determination skills are really critical. And then underneath that, as I said, we have self-advocacy. And so here's the definition for self-advocacy. Very basic, right? Self-determination, like I said, that's a lifetime curriculum for us. Self-advocacy, very short and to the point. Right? the ability and opportunity to speak on behalf of oneself. Okay, and you notice opportunity is larger, right? Because if we don't give and provide the opportunity to practice these skills, then how can we actually say that we can master them? We know this is when we're learning something. You know, we talk about the ability to learn something and generalize it from one environment to another. All right, if we just learn something in isolation and we never get a chance to practice it, have we really learned it? Okay? Same with self-advocacy. All right, if we're teaching students, we're teaching our kids how to do this, we've got to make sure we give them opportunities. All right? And so here we come with the IEP. Hello, opportunity. Hello, IEP. It is right there. It is right there for us, waiting for us to grab it up. Okay? One of the best opportunities, one of the best places for individuals with disabilities to practice self-advocacy and self-determination is to be actively involved. And notice here the IEP development process and the meeting. Okay? So not just getting that invitation at age 14 or 15 or 16. They've actually got to be involved in that process as a whole. And so I chose this picture, okay, because she's really cute, this young girl, right? And she's looking a little excited and a little scared all at once, right? And this is how we feel. This is how students feel. This is how we feel as educators, right? When we're expected to do this. And, you know, I'm going to be very honest right now, and I'm going to date myself again, all right? Because I started teaching in the mid-1980s, okay? And I know, it's like, oh, 85 days. We did have IEPs at that point. Yeah, we actually started having those in the mid-1970s. But I wrote them out in triplicate. Remember the cargo paper? Yeah, and we were upscale because you didn't have to put the sheet in between. It was like the NCR paper, right? But it never occurred to me when I was writing those IEPs and when I was having my IEP meetings that I should bring the students in. It never occurred to me. My training did not include that. I had never heard anyone speak to me about that. And what's even more shameful, and I can't believe I'm going to share this with you, but I will. What's even more shameful is for me to say that that never occurred to me, and I'm a family member of a person with some challenges. My youngest sister is deaf. Right? She has a number of other disabilities too. So I grew up with her. I was 13 when she was born. She was part of my inspiration for going into this. And so I grew up with this. I knew her. I knew the challenges. And yet, when I got in and I did my first IEP meetings as a new teacher, it never occurred to me to include the students. I didn't learn that until later on when I was working on my master's program 10 plus years later. So I think everybody now in the field sees this and understands the importance of inviting the student in. And actually, by law, we have to. Right? Let's take it those teenagers. Right? There's so much more involved in this than just the meeting invitation. Okay? So this little girl's looking a little scared, a little excited. I also chose her because she's young. Okay? We can start including our students in their IEPs when they're in elementary school. Okay? Can I see a show of hands? How many have actually brought their kids into their IEP meetings in first grade? Kindergarten? First grade. All right, love it. Second grade, third grade. Okay? Yeah, I see a few more hands. This is critical. This is critical. All right? Now, they don't have to be involved in the entire meeting because it is a series of mandates. We're responding to a lot of requirements in the IEP. But students start to know that there is something different with them early on. Okay? Usually even before they actually get into school. But for sure by first and second grade, they understand. Okay? Now, I know primarily we're talking about students who are deaf and hard of hearing, but we know that many times our students will have other issues too. They'll struggle with learning disabilities or attention deficit. And students that have those disabilities will report to us and through our research that I knew by second grade, I knew by third grade, and I wish I'd known about the IEP process then and what the IEP was. So what we can do for our young ones like this is bring them in from the beginning of the meeting. Okay? And teach them those wonderful social skill opportunities. But what do you do when you meet someone? You look them in the eye, you smile, you shake their hand. Nice to meet you. My name is, and your name is. Thank you for coming to my IEP meeting. And let them understand And yes, they have some challenges, but guess what? I got some really good news for you. There's a whole group of people called a team that come together and work on making school the best experience possible for you. When we fill out a paper, we're going to talk about what your challenges are and what your strengths are, and we want to know what you're good at. Because we're going to use what you're good at to help you with your challenges, so that you're going to be successful. That's what we're doing. I know teachers who have done this, and they bring in snacks. You know, oh my goodness, snacks? Really? Yeah. Juice and cookies or brownies and chocolate always good thing, right? Chocolate always makes the day better, right? And you can have the students serve the drinks and serve the cookie. Would you like a drink? Would you like a cookie? Okay. So they're learning those skills. And then after everyone's seated, thank you for coming to my IEP meeting. I know you're going to talk about all the good things, all the things and maybe even have them talk about one thing they struggle with. You know, one little guy was in an IEP meeting, teacher had worked with him, and they made Rice Krispie cookies. And he had that Rice Krispie cookies, and I think it was some kind of high seed juice or something. But he got to stay, introduced, and he said, I have to say, I'm having trouble, and I get in trouble every week because I get in fights on the playground. I know I need to work on that. I know I need to work on the fights on the playground. So that was one of the first goals. And he would continue, and I got to observe a couple of more meetings, and he got to the point where not only was he identifying his challenges, but he was helping to write the goals. And he could talk about how he was doing, because they would set up a data chart. Okay, well, so you average 10 fights a week. What can we do to bring that down? Well, you know, what should we shoot for? Can we bring it down to 8? How about 7? How about 6? So we keep data on that. So we get students that back up, and as they get older and they gain more knowledge, then they have more and more involvement in the IEP, so that by the time they are that magic 14, 15, and 16, they fully understand the IEP, they understand what their disabilities are, and they can lead the meeting. Okay? How cool is that? When I first started talking with special educators about that, I got this panic look. It's like, oh, what am I going to do? That's my job. It's my job to lead the IEP. It's like, no. It's your job to lead the process. But it's okay. Right? And you're there to help, you know, make sure all those other compliance pieces are in place. For the students, be sure to do that. So, yes, are we going to experience that look? Absolutely. Okay? If we need one the IEP to actually do this legacy building process, this is where we need to start. Okay? So, what does research say? Okay, we're at my objective number 2. What does research say about involving students in the IEP? Because this is not new. We've been doing this now for about 10 or 15 years, and we've got some research to talk about this. Okay, I'm going to share with you some research from a study that I did while I was working in my doctorate program in Oklahoma. We actually have, there are a number of articles that came out through this research. This one is one of my favorites because it's designed to be helpful for teachers and bringing them into the IEP process. But we went out and we observed several different needs. Okay, we were interested in finding out some things. All right? One of the things that we were interested in finding out in the IEP needs was who really understands the purpose of an IEP? What's the process for this? And who really gets it? Because as special educators, we get it. We've been trained in that. Right? But who really else on the team understands this? And what we found out, we did a pre-post, is that there were 2 individuals that stood out as knowing the least about the purpose and the intent of an IEP meeting. And that was the student and the general teacher. Shocking. Right? Right? Not surprising, actually. The student, because unless we cue them in on this process, unless we train them on this, they're not going to know. They may or may not even know they're on an IEP. Right? And they certainly don't know what an IEP meeting is unless we train them. And then the general ed teacher. Okay? Yeah, it's this meeting that I have to go to. They're going to talk about somebody I have in my class. Don't really understand the process. Okay? So we've got to do a better job, all right, of teaching our students. And we definitely need to do a better job of including our general ed teachers in this process. So that was a wake-up call to look at that data. We also did some data on who's talking during the meeting. And I remember when we did some predictions, I was like, oh, it's going to be 75 or 80% special ed teacher, I know it. Okay? And it actually turned out not to be that high. This is called an exploded donut data chart. But we see that the special ed teacher actually talked half the time, 51%. The other half of the time is divided up across all the other IEP team members. Family was the next largest at 15%, and general ed teacher and administrators. But notice up at the very top of the donut there, the students spoke 3% of the time. And next to that is a 2% where no conversation was occurring. Because the way we collected this data was we did 10-second intervals. We were collecting data, momentary time sampling. So every 10 seconds we were making sure who was talking. Okay. So, and these were random IEPs that we chose that had been their training. So it's kind of sad to say that students talk just 1% more than when there was no talking during the room. All right. So in this research we used a product called self-directed IEP. And we can now say that the self-directed IEP, which is published through Shepherd's West, is now research-based intervention, and because of the study that we did. Right now, I have slides at the back of this presentation if you'd like more information on that particular product. Okay? But it breaks down the meaning, just the meaning, into a dozen steps. Okay? Introducing yourself, introducing the IEP team members, stating the purpose of the meeting, reviewing the goals, goes all through these. Okay? And so we collected some initial data because we wanted to see if we break the meeting down into these segments, are students doing any of this on their own for training or receiving any kind of intervention? And you can see that in a lot of places it was 0%. Okay? Students rarely introduce themselves. No one stated the purpose of the meeting at all. Which will kind of go back to that first slide where, general ed teachers and students were the least about the purpose of the meeting because we don't really take time to do that. We know, as those in the field, that we don't really take the time to educate. Okay? Rarely did they ask for feedback, but we do see down here near the bottom that half the time students express interest. And 8% of the time they express some limits and they express some skills, and 72% of the time, yes. 72%, we see that, anyway, I'm looking at the wrong column. The yes numbers, we see that we're almost at 50% on expressing interest. Okay? We're a little bit higher on expressing options and goals. So those near the bottom, not the closing the meeting, but the last three, are a little bit higher than any of the rest. The reason for that is because in the IEP, if we have a student in there, when we're talking about those transition goals, we ask the student, so what's your vision? What's your goal for post-school? Right? What's your goal for employment, education and training, independent living? So students were asked those questions, and so they responded. And so that's why we saw some evidence that students were responding to those. Other than that, there wasn't really a trend. Okay? This is one of my favorite slides. This is what I call the transition heartbeat at the meeting. So we collected data not only on who was talking, but what they were talking about every 10 seconds. And this is reflected in the first 129 meetings. And you can see at the very beginning, the transition was, kind of a low. We didn't talk about it a whole lot. And then it kind of, as the meeting went on, we kind of had a crescendo and we went up. And then notice near the very end, it bottomed out. And then we saw this big spike at the top. And so when I first saw this data, like, that's really odd. What's going on here? Why, we kind of had this steady heartbeat and we got this drop. So we went back and looked at the data we were coding, and we trained our researchers to go ahead and collect some data as the meeting was ending, and it was winding down. And what we found out is at the very end, when we see transition talked about the most, was the meeting was ending, and the teachers or the administrators would say to the students, so, what are you planning on doing this summer? Have you gotten enrolled yet? So they would start asking transition-based questions after the meeting was over. So when we saw this big spike, we thought that was very interesting. Okay? What I would have loved to have seen is that transition was actually evenly spread across here, and for students that are especially 14, 15, 16, we see that at the highest number at the very beginning. So that's the first thing we need to talk about. Okay? Not the last thing when the meeting's over. And we're talking with the family and students, saying, so how's that summer internship going? You get that application in, you got any colleges yet? We weren't asking this question at the right time. Okay. And then the last piece of research that I want to share with you is also very interesting. This is just recently published. David Tess went through all the research and all the articles that we have regarding student involvement in the IEP, self-determination, self-advocacy, right? And did an analysis to look at post-school indicators for success, right? And we found the top 5. It's very interesting when you look at these. Vocational classes during school, jobs and internships in school, and paid job experiences before graduation. Okay? We know, you guys, I'm not saying anything, you don't already know, one of the best motivators for students to have jobs, all right, after school, is to have a job in school so they experience that beach house, right? I mean, we all are very motivated by the beach house. Okay? So having those experiences are very strong indicators of post-school success for students. And then social transition programming in school. So having a transition program where the students are learning the IEP process and how to be involved in the IEP. And they're learning self-determination and self-advocacy. And then finally, social skills training and integration with age-appropriate peers. Those were found to be the top predictors of post-school success for students. Okay? When I look at those, I see IEP. Like, yeah. We talk about all those things. And we set up goals. And we set up linkages for relationships for all of these things within the IEP. All right, so again, another fabulous opportunity to work on this legacy building process. Okay, so what are some of the current trends and strategies then for teaching this to students? All right, working with this. Student involved in the IEP process. Objective question number 3. All right, I love this. Okay, I'm going to read it in case you're not able to see in the back. The caption says, decisions, right? And he's looking at some t-shirts. One says, your attitude might be my biggest barrier. Another t-shirt that says, I am, therefore I matter. And another t-shirt that says, nothing about me counts. Okay? And then the caption underneath says, Peter ponders over apparel to wear to his next IEP meeting. All right, you might hear a few chuckles. We are doing a really good job in our field of creating some power phrases. These are all really good power phrases. But if we're not teaching the skills go along with that, because if you just walk into a meeting and say, you can't do anything in this meeting without me, nothing about me without me, we got advocacy gone wrong. Okay. All right, so it's not just about coming up with power phrases and fun t-shirts for students to pick out what to wear. It's much more than that. Okay. Same with this. Okay, I love this one too. The caption says, okay, Amy's next goal has to do with making requests. Who can help with that? All right. And the caption underneath says, Harvey continues to ask the wrong questions in a room full of helpers. Okay? And we have to watch this. This is us as educators and service providers. Because we know what the students need. We want to make sure that happens. And we end up doing it for them. Okay? So these 2 slides, making sure that we're not just giving students power phrases, that we're actually teaching them those important concepts. Okay? And we're writing the goals in such a way that the students are empowered to follow through with those goals. Right? And we don't make sure that everything is so easy for them to accomplish those goals. Is it the end of the world when we have our annual IEP meeting for a goal to not be met? It's okay. Right? But we need students to be reporting why it wasn't met and what was going on. And what do we need to do then to adjust? Because remember, that's part of those self-determination skills. What did we create with problem solve and figure out? What do we need to do then to readjust this goal? Okay. So there are a lot of wonderful resources on teaching self-determination and working through this process and teaching self-advocacy. I've shared with you a link through the Zero Center at the University of Oklahoma. I've shared this with you just because it's a nice compilation. There's no money involved. You don't have to register for the site. But this site features a lot of research-based strategies and interventions, and it also does talk about some that are commercial if they're enterprise. So you've got a wide variety of resources here. Okay? So the Choice Maker Self-Determination Series includes the one that I was just sharing with you that has the 10 steps to being involved in the IEP, where you state the purpose of the meeting, you introduce yourself, and that's the one that we validated through our research. Okay? There's also IEP team modules to increase student involvement. Whose Future Is It Anyway? Through Michael Waymeyer at the University of Kansas is a fabulous curriculum to work with students. Okay? You can also find all of these resources just by Googling the name. So you don't have to go through that website. It's just needed because they're all put together right there. If you're wondering about assessments, and how do we assess this? Because again, everything has to be data driven. We've got to have data. All right, we need a pre and a post. So there are some really good assessments out there to manage self-determination and all these constructs. Okay? All of these are free and available again through this website, or you can Google them and find lots of links for those. The one at the bottom, the personal preference indicators, were designed for students with more significant support needs. So they're a handy one. We don't always see students with more significant support needs featured in some of our curriculum, so I want to point that out. It's a very good one. Pure for students that have more support needs. Okay. All right, so now I get to my favorite part of the presentation and share with you the results of some of the students that we've worked with. Okay. Because this is not easy. There's nothing easy about this. Okay. So I'm going to show you a couple of PowerPoints. The first one is titled It's Not Easy, because it features quotes from students who have gone through this process. And I will tell you that the quotes from this were a reflection of a very painful process. These were students that I worked with over a year-long process, and I met with them on Saturdays. So they were dedicated to it. They were also motivated. They received a little pay to be involved in this. And they had to learn the steps to direct their IEP. But they had to learn much more than that because they had to learn self-advocacy and self-determination. It was a big struggle. So near the end, I had this wonderful session with them where I talked with them and asked them questions, and they answered them very honestly. So this PowerPoint is reflective of the work that they did and how they felt about what they did. So I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to discuss with you a little bit more about that IEP. And then I'm going to show you Will's PowerPoint, which is a young man who developed a PowerPoint for his IEP. Okay? So let's go to the It's Not Easy PowerPoint first. I'm going to show you music that goes along with it, and then we'll come back and I'll share with you a little bit more information. seen that PowerPoint a number of times, and it still gives me chills every time. And when I put that PowerPoint together and showed the students, they were like, wow. I remember saying some of those things. And I asked them, I said, is it okay if I share this when I make presentations? And they said, really? You want to do that? I said, yeah, your voice is very strong. And I said, what you've gone through is not very easy at all. I said, wow, okay. You can do that, so we gave me permission to share that. And I will tell you that that particular, it's not even PowerPoint, is also available through the website, the Sarasota website that I showed you. And it does not have the music attached to it, and you have to do that separately. Superman's fighting Superman. It's not attached to it, but you can download that. This particular group of students also went with me and spoke at several conferences as panel presenters. And that is such a powerful tool. And I know you've got student panels that you're listening to over the next couple of days. There's nothing like that student voice. But we have to prepare them for that first. Because there's nothing easy about this. When we talk about the IUP as a legacy building tool, I mean that wholeheartedly. But I also am very serious when I say it's not an easy process. You know, then again, none of us went into this field because we thought it was going to be easy, right? We went into it because we wanted to make differences. Right? The very first thing that I was asked before I started speaking. All right, so the next one I want to show you is Will's PowerPoint. This is a young man, he was in junior high at the time, middle school, and was going through a very similar curriculum, learning how to be involved in his IEP, and he first informed us that he was not willing to do this, and he had no interest in it. It was only doing it because his teacher made him do it. He wasn't going to have anything that he was going to show in his IEP, and he all the time he went through the instruction, he changed his mind. And he actually had his mom help him to assist him in putting this together. So the PowerPoint I'm going to show you now, so he showed him his IEP, and he wrote it, put all the illustrations in there, and he chose the music for the backdrop in this too. So we switch it over, and you can hear from Will. So Bill's board is very strong in there. Isn't that great? And this was the young man that was looking at anything to do with this when it started. Okay? He's also given us permission to show these. And is thrilled with the fact that his voice gets to be heard as well. Okay? I will tell you that, and many of you are probably doing something similar to this, and, you can share head nods with you. It changes the dynamic of the meeting completely. All right, and it reminds us that this really is the process for building legacies for our students. And it's way beyond just the compliance. You can develop templates. I work with a number of teachers, and they will actually use the IEP for their state and develop the templates the students can use then to build. I have some states, or some teachers that are using their state summary performance. And that's especially effective when students are about to graduate, their junior or senior year. Because that's one of their performance tools what they take with them. Teachers planning questions. You guys can more significant support needs. What are your dreams? What are your fears? What are your biggest nightmares? Okay, so there are a variety of ways that you can set this up with students. Or let students create. You know, say, here are the things that we need for you to cover. You create your own template. Tell me how you'd like to represent yourself. Powerful stuff here. All right, so wrapping it up here. How can the IEP be this tool for building a legacy? We've been talking about it now for the whole hour. And I want to share this wrap-up quote with you. You have to remember this, and I kind of mentioned this already when I showed you the teachers. Okay? Where you discard does not enable you to fly. This is a label that they have to put on Superman costumes with capes. Okay? And yeah, people are smiling, yes, they know this, right? Because kids put the cape on, it's like, oh, I can jump tall buildings in a single bound. Right? And kids have jumped off porches and rooftops, you know, and then we go to the ER because we've got broken legs and whatnot. Okay? So that the manufacturers need to now put that label on the costume. Okay? Because just putting a cape on doesn't give you that ability. All right? I'm going to say this in relationship to what I've been talking about to you for the last hour. Just bringing the student into the meeting is not enough. Just inviting the student, just giving the student that required invitation does not set them up for a legacy of success. They need so much more. We've been talking about what that is. Okay? So don't just give them the cape. Don't just give them the invitation and go, well, you know, if you want to come, you don't have to come. We're going to be talking about your IEP. Okay? So much more. Let's not just give them the cape. Let's give them that instruction. Okay? It's an interdisciplinary process. We've been talking about this. All right? We've got to involve students in this process because we've got to make sure that they are able to build future relationships and have those partnerships. Right? For education, for employment, for influence. Right. And ultimately, it provides roads that will ensure a sound future, which we're about to embark on for the next 2 days, building a sound future. Right? And then, of course, we want them to be able to get at least 25 Christmas cards, right? Or e-cards or Facebook posts, you know, like my grandmother at the age of 97. Those relationships are critical. Okay? And that's really what the IEP is all about. So my last few slides, I've referenced the articles that I referred to. Okay? Also some really good resources, especially if you're working with kids in elementary. We have half of you are elementary. Mike Waymire has a learning model instruction for early elementary. Probably seems to be self-determined. Okay? Again, you can Google this. You can go to the Xerox Center website and find out information on that. But Xerox curriculum, there's an adolescent version. Okay? So there's lots of good publications out there. They've all been research-based. They're all validated. You can use them. You want to do some stuff. I want to thank you for listening to me, giving me the opportunity to share some of my passion with you. And as you can see, I'm still working on building my own legacy of making differences with people. It's been my honor. And thank you so much for having me. And I wish you the best over the next 2 days of the conference.